Welcome to The Lumber Word, where industry veterans Matt Beamer, Greg Riley, and Ashley Buckholt dissect the world of commodity lumber each week. We bring you up-to-date insights on supply, demand, and market trends, sharing our trading expertise to benefit everyone in the supply chain. Join us for informative and entertaining discussions that guarantee to make you wiser about all things lumber.
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode number 87 of the Lumber Word. We've got Matt Beamer, reoccurring guest. Heck, Charles, you might as well just be on all the time. Charles DeLaTorre.
That's too many egos in one room, I think.
Industrial Forest Products. We're recording this on the 7th of August, 2024. Glad to be here. Greg's out of the office today. He just called and wished us well on some things. So wanted to let's kick it off and talk a little bit about lumber. It's felt like we've had a little bit of a better market. Matt, you and I talked a few times on the phone after hours about it. Charles, you and I talked about it. I'll run through and give you what I'm seeing a little bit on the lumber market. It seems to be there's a few more people getting on board with buying a few extra things. I think between maybe mills rationalize capacity over the last few months, figuring out for the last few months how to keep less wood on the ground. I could say rail being slow, but I always hate to say and use those excuses for anything. I think just overall, instead of maybe 6 trucks of something being bought, now there's 7, while everybody down the chain is positioned for 5 or 6 loads. So, spruce seems to be good. Eastern spruce seems to be good. There's a lot of the Eastern guys coming back from, I'm supposed to say people, not guys. A bunch of the Eastern people coming back from their break. And I haven't noticed a lot. I see very minimal lists. The outtake has been phenomenal the past week. And really for the past 3 weeks, I'm noticing we're selling more distributors that we normally didn't sell, asking for quicker wood because cars haven't gotten to their position. We're seeing a few more multifamily inquiries coming through. It hasn't turned into a lot of business yet, but we have sold some more multifamily, which is really good to see. So overall, I have a better tone on the market. It feels better. I know I'm still feel wildly bullish, and I need to temper that a little bit, but it feels definitely better than it has. Matt, what are you seeing on there?
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. I'm not quite as bullish as some people are. I was talking to a friend of mine today at lunchtime, and he's in the lumber business. He's just a friend in the business, and he's a big futures guy, and he was thinking, no, we're going to go 560, 580. I don't know. I mean, I'd be thrilled if that happened because I'd make a hell of a lot of money on my inventory. But I'm going to play it straight down the middle. I'm just the way I'm doing my business is really conservative, and I'm going to take half as much risk in the next 5 months as I did in the first 7 months. And so I'm just slowing everything down on my end. Having said that, I'm actually surprisingly busy this week, and it's not coming all at once. It's sort of in waves. I'll sit around for 2 hours and no phone calls, no emails, and all of a sudden I get blasted with 5 orders and 20 emails. And so I don't really have any real strong opinion about the market going up another 10 or up another 60. It is definitely up, and I see this as an opportunity for me to just sell things, and maybe I'll buy some of it back and maybe I won't. I'm just really just a kind of a trader right now, not as much of an inventory manager and more of a trader and more of a mill sales guy, honestly, which is where I want to be. I just don't want to take as much risk going forward. And I've talked about this many times this year where I thought the second half of the year was going to be unpredictable.
Yeah.
And I just feel like that's still true. And when it's no different than somebody buying a house. When they're not sure what the future is economically, they don't buy the house, right? Like house sales come from confidence. People have confidence in the future. They buy a house, they sign a 30-year mortgage, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like the house buyer that not sold on the market being good in 6 months or a year. And for other reasons that have nothing to do with lumber. I think lumber is about equal right now. Production and demand is fine. The mills have dropped enough production, and the Euros have stopped shipping so much lumber over here. 2 before 16s, 2 6/16s are starting to gain their value back. This happened last August too, remember?
Yes.
And so I think that's a nice trend. Those are trends that I think are good. But am I willing to go invest a bunch of my own personal money and Hampton money on prices being significantly higher 90 days from now? Or because it takes me, I buy a car, it takes 2 months to rationalize that into profits.
Yeah.
By the time it gets down to my inventory and then I truck it out to somebody, it's a 6 to 8 week lead time. And right now I really want to do a lot of that. I'll do a little. I just don't want to do a lot.
What are you made a good point. You're doing some mill sales too. I think people that are just listening, your floor is really unique because you have a bunch of traders and you have mill production. And I mean, from the floors I've been on, it's a pretty cool floor, the dynamics that you guys have over there. What's going on in the Pacific Northwest with lumber right now in the U.S. species, dry dug fir, hem fir, and all that? Because it's odd. I've gotten more inquiry out of Texas this week, and some people are looking for spruce that normally use Doug fir and studs. So I'm guessing Doug fir studs moved a little bit.
Yeah, green Doug fir is off the market, and all of our green business is really good. Has been good for a couple 3 weeks. Our order files are massively increased over 2 weeks ago on green.
Yeah.
And then on dry Doug fir, it's a lot harder to go out and buy dry Doug fir in the open market, whether you buy it from Hampton or Sierra or if you go up to Canada.
Yeah.
And so there's the dry Doug fir market is very liquid, and it's definitely hard to buy the tallies that you want to buy, and hard to get the ship times that you're basically playing defense if you're a buyer right now.
Mm-hmm.
So the West Coast Doug fir industry is very healthy. Hem fir has been good, not as good as Doug fir, but it's pretty good on a scale of 1 to 10. It's like a 7 or an 8. I've sold a
Pretty
bunch of
good.
hem fir today, and I've sold a lot of hem for the last 3 weeks. So this isn't something that's just the last couple of days. It's been brewing. From the low trade to the high trade on 2 before and 2 6 hem fir, I'd say it's $50 to $70 in the last 3 weeks. And then from the low trade on spruce, what I sold you and Greg some stuff into Chicago for versus what we're selling for today is $75 higher from the panic orders that we took in the middle of July, right? So
Yeah.
things are a lot better, and there's a lot more liquid, and I too am selling some hem fir into Doug fir and spruce market. So it's competing not just in the West, it's going elsewhere.
That's perfect. I'll segue over to Charles here with this comment. So we started moving a lot more 2100 spruce up in the Midwest, Northeast, into the West Virginia market this week and a little bit last week, and asked a couple of my people that I sell it to, hey, look at you're coming into the market now. What's changed? And what some of them said is, they used to use a lot of the higher grades in pine. And the 14s and 16s in the higher grade in southern yellow pine basically have finally taken off a little bit. And now spruce and some of those grades are starting to compete, especially, Matt, as you said, on 16s and 14s. Charles, like Matt and I, that's not a world we live in the pine market. Update us give us the 411 on pine.
Well, I think 14s and 16s and 4-inch is probably the strongest thing in the market, no doubt, right? I mean, anybody can see that what's happened in print over the past couple of weeks. There's not a real clear picture as to what has made that happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Overall picture, I mean, is very, not to jump on Matt's bandwagon, but I kind of echo his sentiment, right? Things are getting a little bit more liquid, but there's also, you've got storms in the Southeast, you've got some other issues that might arise from the wet weather that may cause some firming in pricing. But I mean, it's just hit or miss. I mean, it's not, we haven't seen or witnessed the appreciation that y'all are seeing in the other North American species. That's obvious, right? But 4-inch overall has tightened up considerably over the past 10 to 15 days for sure. 2x10 is still, pretty tight. 2x12 is getting better than it was a couple weeks ago, but not, nothing to kind of write home about. You just got to participate, honestly. and see where that liquidity level is in pine specifically, in all grades.
So you deal a lot too in the low grade market in pine. Is that has there been any follow through in the low grades at all?
That's fits and starts, right? I mean, just like anything else, it's one of those things where you'll get guys that'll step in at a value and then they'll go away, but they'll buy big blocks. And when they buy big blocks, that lumber seems to appreciate rapidly because a lot of it is contracted and not so much open market anymore as it has been historically. And the big boys that have done that have played it really, really well because they'd rather have it in those grades than have to fight for it.
And you also do a lot in the 9-foot 2x4, 2x6 pine market. A lot of that's multifamily. I mean, my personal belief, I still think there's a lot of people that are long-term short some of the multifamily jobs because honestly, you remember we talked about this 3 or 4 months ago. Greg and I were talking. We didn't think it was a good thing to take forward pricing then. Well, some of the people that took it, it ended up being right. And I think that people just continued to take orders and book them out. And I don't know how much is out there, but I think that there has to be some covered. What are you seeing on that 9-foot, like multifamily type of Southern pine market?
I mean, there's liquidity, but you got to be priced right. Everybody's very, very conservative. And, the last leg down in pine of that $80 or whatever that nobody saw coming, everybody bought in the low threes, right? And then next thing you know, you wake up 5 days later and it's sub $300 a mil, and it kind of sent shockwaves and everybody stepped away from the desk, right? And, your species that y'all primarily deal in competitively for us, I mean, there's now that spruce on the east side is kind of appreciated the way it has, there's huge arbitrage opportunities if you're open to it. I mean, you're talking, 6-inch 9s delivered Carolinas and pine at, low 4s, and 6-inch spruce is what, Ash? $590 we talked about.
Yeah, I mean, 6-inch spruce is hard to buy right now. I mean, I don't know. Matt's probably better at that. He
Same
sees
thing with
these
6-inch hemp fir too. I mean, it's the same.
Yeah.
They're in the high 500s. They're way above 2x4 on 9-footers. In fact, that'll be one of my little things I want to marry this week. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, that's perfect. Like, look at 6-inch. We have trucks. That's not something we're heavy on trucks in the reload. We've got some coming into the port, and you throw a number on there and you get it, right? And it's well above print numbers, especially for straight trucks that are prompt. So that's interesting. So pine going forward, Charles, I haven't really seen any. We talked about, Matt had a good point about supply and demand being in check. When I look at the numbers, there's still probably not, there hasn't been enough lumber taken off for the long term, but that's going to continue, I believe. But in the South, I mean, shoot, there's still some stuff, what they call it, greenfield and brownfield stuff coming up, right?
Yeah, there's quite a few mills that are still, I mean, once again, we talked about that. And when you build something at the investment level that a sawmill takes,
yeah,
I mean, you can't exactly say, no, man, I'm just kidding, and walk away from it, right?
Yeah.
So, it's going to be
$1 million.
Yeah, and you've already negotiated tax breaks and abatements and in lieu of deals with states and local agencies. I mean, you can't exactly just desert that opportunity. But, the big thing for us is, quite frankly, is everybody historically that has been involved in y'all species are coming down here and playing the long game. And a lot of that has to do with how we manage our timber stands down here, et cetera. But pine as a whole, something's got to change because we're getting some liquidity and these numbers are deals and what have you. And it's difficult because you get people that show up to the table, make things happen, and then they disappear for 3 or 4 weeks.
Well, Matt and I were talking the other day, and we're like, when we run out of spruce in North America here, we're gonna come down and start trading pine in your mark and just put a bunch of it on the ground, fellas, all over the place.
Good luck. You put it on the ground, it doesn't trade the same, I promise. You'll immediately be upside down about $45 to $50.
Trust me, I've done it before. It's definitely a hard thing. You don't want to put it on the ground in 90-degree weather in Chicago because you can hear the bands popping as you walk through the reload. I wanted to take a few.
One thing I did want to talk about though.
Go ahead.
That multifamily paper that you asked me about. And sorry, I got.
Am I off on that? Is that wrong? Do you think I'm wrong on that?
No, I mean there's a lot of interesting paper that's out there right now.
And when you say when people don't understand what paper is, it's basically people take an order long term to multifamily jobs
for anybody. Price locks for whoever.
And they basically write it down and put it on their drawer, whatever. Now they probably have it on a spreadsheet to buy in the future and normally manage that risk in a couple different ways. I just personally don't think the risk is managed right now.
There's no way to manage it. You and I talked about that. Matt and I talked about it. There's no real way to manage that risk. And I think I put something on LinkedIn about it as well. You know, it just the math doesn't math. And there's a lot of cowboy activity, irresponsible activity, quite frankly, you know, shorten large volumes of fiber at these levels can be extremely
I ran into a guy,
dangerous.
A Portland guy that I see occasionally that's one of those forward sellers, right? That's his entire career. He works for one of those companies. And he was bragging to me about some giant job he took for like fourth quarter. This is at the bottom. This is like in mid-July when we were taking, you know, $30 counters on cars we wanted to load.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, yeah, I sold this huge job for November, December, January. I go, did you get a premium for it? He goes, not much. I go, you're not worried about that? He goes, no, not at all. So basically the attitude sort of sums up the industry. Like if you think of our industry as when things are really good, everybody just gets complacent and thinks it's always going to keep going up.
Yeah.
And then when things are really bad, everybody thinks it's always going to be bad forever, right? But that's how you get burned the hardest, is when you just keep following the trend mindlessly without any concept of risk. What if you were flipping around to mortgage? What if you're a mortgage broker and you're out there selling a bunch of 3 and 4% mortgages, and all of a sudden the Fed jacks rates, and now you're talking 7.5% rates, and you're holding all these bad loans that you were planning on just throwing into the market, right? Brian talked about this when interest rates started going up drastically. He said the interest rate is now reflecting the cost of risk management, right? And so that is what interest is about. It's this is what I'm going to get paid for taking a risk that you're going to pay me back, right?
Yeah.
I'm getting 7%. That's my VIG. You go hard money, it's 12 to 15%, right? You go to a loan shark, it's 26%. Go to cash place, you know, it's a lot. Well, in our business, we make 2, 3, 4% margins as traders. And if you're really good, you make 8 or 10%. Like if you're some specialty trader, if you're doing something really interesting and unique. Some of these job shipper guys can make 8 and 10% margins on jobs if they hit it right. But selling a huge job in the middle of the summer at the low prices of the year for 6 months out at these prices with not much of a premium, I find that to be risky. Sorry.
Yeah, there was just no way to cover it. And look, as a buyer of those jobs, the buyer was doing their.
But here's the question though: who's really to blame, right? Because at some point, somebody's got to take responsibility. You got somebody that took the paper. You got somebody that acknowledged the paper, issued the paper, right? Yeah. But at what point do you look at a number and say that's just not logical, right? That just doesn't make any sense. Because at some point, somebody somewhere has to manage risk. Risk always comes at a premium, whether it's an interest rate or it's a margin. There's a risk premium associated with everything that we do as human beings in business. Mm-hmm. So if you have somebody that is quoting forward 6 months at today's level, the guy on the other side is obviously doing his due diligence and buying the best he can. Yeah. But at the same time, where does the irresponsibility really fall? Because there's an expectation that there's going to be follow through. And what happens when it doesn't happen? And if you have somebody that's offsides $150, and I can talk about OSB earlier this year, right? When it had a hiccup and cash moved $40 in 4 days, right? There's a lot of people that got caught because that didn't settle for 3 weeks, you know? And we had guys that were coming to us and double buying because the wood wasn't showing up. And it's cheaper to buy another load of wood than pay framers to stand around with their hands in their pockets, or anybody, right?
No doubt. Well, that brings up a great point. What is OSB doing? We haven't really talked about that in the show in a month.
It's OSBing kind of the same way futures are futuring, right? Yeah. You got a couple guys that make it, and they've established a new norm, and they've done a hell of a job doing it. I mean, they really have. You know, you've got print that finally acknowledged in the Southeast a $5 down print, but to your point, last week, Western delivered markets were down 20, and I think they were only down 5 this week. That's quite a bit of a change, right? On midweek. I think Denver was only down 5, and it was down 20 last week. So that tells me right there, there's price improvement in those delivered markets that wasn't there last week. But now all of a sudden in the consuming market, we're down 5 and mills are up $15.
Yeah, that was an interesting thing on print last week. I made the comment on your LinkedIn. You see Denver and Salt Lake down $20, but Western Canada is unchanged. Somebody's using that as a dumping ground to get rid of stuff.
Yep.
Right?
And then all of a sudden they're getting $15 to $20 higher than that price at the mill now. So it's a very unique scenario. And it's a healthy market. I mean, it really is. I mean, supply, you look at all the commentary, everything's covered by contracts. Nobody's buying anything extra because everybody can live at these prices. But when you start talking about forward selling and forward pricing and forward risk, you've got to get $100 because we can go from 305 or 315 to $600 in 8 weeks. And all it takes is 2 mills go down for a press rebuild, and then a press rebuild that took 8 weeks takes 14. And then all of a sudden you got 30% less capacity in the Southeast. Then what happens?
Is there any new OSB mills coming online? And I mean, I don't follow OSB like I used to. It's been 20 years since I sold OSB, but I know that that they're always building new plants. Is there anything new coming online here in the next 6 months to a year?
I know Chrono's building a behemoth in Alabama.
There you go.
That's the only thing I know of.
Yeah.
But I know Tolko just came back online after some fire or something.
There is Euro still coming over here too, right, Charles?
Yep. But they do a no screen back 9 foot, and then they do all flooring products. So I mean the diamond in the rough for domestic is going to be your 5/8, your 15/32 full half inch, and 4x8.
The Chrono plant in Alabama going to make mostly 3/4.
I mean, I think they're going to make every product we consume domestically.
Because they kind of went after that 3/4 market when they were still producing it in Europe. And I remember that they came out with some kind of a copyrighted thing that they wanted to get out there in the market. It's like 10 years ago. That's how closely I follow it, right? But I do remember that. And I think they're the largest OSB manufacturer in the world, aren't they?
In the world. Any engineering panel,
massive.
largest manufacturer in the world.
Yeah.
They've got, so the OSB mill that they're building in Alabama, I may or may not be correct on this, but I think it's being built on the same campus as a particle board and an MDF plant.
Oh,
so, I mean, they're going to be completely vertically integrated from the stump to the product. I mean, you use the sawdust from everything that you're chipping up to build and make MDF. Any flakes that you reject, you turn into particle board. So, I mean, they know what they're doing. And if you look at their footprint and their facilities overseas, I mean, they're impressive. I mean, very impressive. But it's going to produce a lot.
You have time here for a little plug where we can figure out on some of this stuff coming up?
Yeah.
So the Lumber Word is going to be live at Russ Taylor's Global Wood Summit, October 29th and 30th in Vancouver, BC. Matt and I were talking about it last night. We're pretty excited about it. And Matt was asking me how big it's going to be. And I've been to some Russ's events, and it's pretty darn good. And the objective of the Global Wood Summit is to feature kind of a wide range of industry experts. Glad to be Matt. I'm glad to be included in industry experts. We never thought we'd be called that in the industry, did we?
I thought you were an expert in 2000 when I first started talking to you.
I felt the same as you. So producers, exporters, importers, selected specialists focused on what's next in 2025 for the national and global trades. So there's going to be 8 international speakers and 20 confirmed North American speakers and panelists. So it's a great event to network at. I've been to a few of those. So all the details are at globalwoodsummit.com. That's globalwoodsummit.com. I highly recommend, if you're in the industry and want to know what's going to go on with fiber in North America and in the world in the rest of this year in 2025, you should sign up and go to that. Like I said, can't wait to be there. So what are we seeing in the rest of the market out there? While we're recording this, I have a couple more texts from some distributors and a few people following up on stuff. And Matt, you're right. I'll sit here for an hour and nothing goes on. And all of a sudden, bam, you get hit with a bunch of inquiries to places that you've never sold to in a while, right? And I was telling Charles before you got on, a buddy emailed me from a quote from 2 days ago, said, "Hey, can you still cover this?" And I'm like, sure, right? And you and I talked about it last night. So there's just enough circulating out there where it feels like it wants to do it, but it's not enough yet, right? And but it's getting there. It certainly feels better than it felt for the past 4 months. I know
So I
there's
got a question though, just out
Yeah.
of curiosity, based on everybody's expertise that is on this outside of mine and your tenured careers, right? One thing I've noticed is that trying to figure out a supply driven market is worlds apart from figuring out how to trade a demand driven market, right? So my question specifically is, from what y'all have seen, fundamentally, I don't think anything's changed, right? Long term. So what is, in y'all's opinion, what is the true driver to what's happened in the other North American species that y'all deal in that's created this $70 premium over 2.5, 3 weeks ago, or low trade? Like, really think like,
The mills really, you got to think about it from, put your mill hat on
it's
for
a
a
great
second.
question.
So this is something that I care about and I pay attention to with other mills that I trade with. How much inventory they have, what's their order file, what are their soft spots, what are their strengths. You got to know those things because it tells you everything you need to know about what could happen in the future, right? So if a mill like me, like our company here, goes into the middle of July and we are struggling to get orders, but we're still trading every single day because that's what mills do. They find the market every single day, right? And then at the end of July, you get to the end of the quarter and you have relatively low mill inventory. You have a 1 week order file, maybe a 2 week order file on some things. That means that your mills did their job, right? And they kept the wood moving. So when mills start stacking lumber and don't have an order file, that's when you have problems, right? So what we were seeing in July was mills were not stacking lumber anymore. They were getting rid of it. That's why the market went down so much further than people realized or thought it could, because mills didn't want to sit there and stack up inventory in the middle of summer. They're like, nope, we're going to get rid of this. At the end of the day, there's either going to be mill people or lumber. You choose. And so the lumber got sold, and some really good deals were done for people that had that raised their hand at the right moment, right? Well, now the quarter's over, so the pressure's off, right? The bad news is behind the mills. They're looking forward, trying to be more optimistic. Mills adjusted production based on their losses. They lost a lot of money. There's not a mill in North America made money in July. I mean, maybe there's one, maybe there's two, but there's a couple hundred that lost. And so, you see the fundamentals really, the mills had a willingness to keep the wood moving, even if it cost them 60, 70, $80 a thousand down push on the price, so that they wouldn't have a glut of inventory, and then they could come into August with a fresh attitude and a little bit of an order file and then just see what happens. Well, in the meantime, there's less euro coming in. Mills have adjusted their production downward. The Eastern spruce guys took all their holiday time. Some of them are still doing it. And so it basically just takes that supply demand equation, which was sort of tilted towards supply, and tilts it back towards demand. And we're talking incremental 2% moves here, buddy. It's like barely turning around the Titanic. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes a month or two. So now we're in the market where there's a little bit more demand because people need to buy some lumber for the shoulder season. They need to get lumber coming for September and October. They're gonna put up some new starts. They're not going to do it in November and December. They're going to do it in September, October, right? So they need those studs. And they need that plate to hit the ground here in August or early September, so they can really take advantage of that spurt of activity from the framers. And that's what's happened. I mean, that's the way I read it. And so you should have expected, and Ashley predicted on this show 3 weeks ago, he said we're at the bottom. And he didn't do it because he was just guessing. He did it because he was looking at the fundamentals, right? The fundamentals were, they spelled themselves out. And in our business, doesn't need a big change for things to turn around. You need just a series of things to happen. So you had fires and fire danger in the West. You've got mills losing a couple $100 million in a quarter. I mean, you've got mills taking holiday time off around the 4th of July in the United States. Then you had mills in Canada taking their July and August normal shutdowns. And I think any mill that could run 3 shifts was now running 2, right? And Greg talks about less euro coming over in August and September. Great. There you go. That's all it took. That's the difference. And then what happens in October, November, December when the demand for lumber goes back down? This is where I'm worried. When the lumber demand for plate stock and studs drops nationally because of weather, are we going to be pumping it out full speed ahead here in America again? I don't know. I don't want
Yeah,
to. I don't want to find out though the hard way.
that's a great point, Matt. Man, great, freaking great answer, dude. That comes from just years of doing this, right? And looking at stuff. And you're right. I mean, I was watching it, and a couple things I saw is your first thing, you hit it right on the head. I don't think people realized how quickly mills got their inventory right sized, right?
Yeah.
And they did.
I agree. I would agree with that.
They did that. I mean, let's face it. A lot of people in this industry, we all have a herd or lemming mentality where nobody wants to be the first one to stand up in this market and say, I think things are changing, or buy something, because everybody was getting beat up by people in the back office. You have too much inventory, and it was along the chain. So we drive these markets down lower than they probably should, because everybody is on the same page, right? Look at futures. Look at futures. I can make the argument in a lot of commodities. The funds, when they get involved in these things, they can drive the markets down and up to places that they normally wouldn't go, but they always want to return to where they want to be at. And as Matt said, as the price started moving up, well, people have business sold, and they're like, well, now we have to go in and cover some stuff because we have business sold at these numbers, and probably some pretty thin stuff. And now I think everybody's on the side where we've got some momentum back to the upside. Do we have a major breakout yet? Probably not, but I think that's healthy, right? We're slowly plodding along and moving up right now. And I will say one thing, Matt. I mean, the mills have done a pretty damn good job not projecting what they're doing. They're just taking off shifts and doing stuff and rationalizing without making announcements, where I think our industry was waiting for that email at 6:30 at night on Wednesday where it said a mill closed down, right? And that was the all clear signal. That didn't happen. Mills just did it. And if you listen to some of their announcements on their calls for the public ones, or you talk to them, they did a really good job. Like,
They don't want to talk about it anymore. It used to be everybody would call up random links and get on the wood wire and
exactly.
publish it, send out an email to everybody, and try to get people talking about it like a bunch of ducks.
Yeah.
And they don't do that anymore because I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that they're afraid of being sued. And so because some employees that are getting laid off, if they find out about it, they could maybe bring a case against the company for finding out through the media or finding out through a third party. I'm not sure exactly what the thing is, the reason why is, but I know that there is, in our industry today, in the year 2024, a lot of production gets changed up or down without anyone knowing about it.
Absolutely.
No announcements come out, right?
That's a huge difference in the last few years. I mean, it's a big difference, and you as you said, you got to watch for the signs for it doing it. So, look, I think we've made the turn.
But hold on, I got one question
Yeah.
to kind of parlay on top of that. If you look at how the market overcorrected and then mills had to make the dire decision to liquidate the way they did, and that extra leg down on all species across the board, is it safe to say that through that process of the last, say, 90 days, Southern Yellow Pine was a canary in the coal mine?
That's a good question.
That's a great question. You can answer that better, because honestly, the market really got feet in other species once those key items in pine started moving. They did.
When did pine start to move? The lows were in the low 200s for 2x6, correct? And you could buy like premium 2x4 16s, number one, for $350 delivered on trucks to Texas, that type of stuff, right?
Yeah.
I mean, those are things that I heard from my customers. Like I said, I don't trade it. That was a month and a half ago. When did it really start to go up? Was that in July, about the same time that Ashley called the bottom, or was it before then?
Shortly after that, actually.
So Yellow Pine reacted?
Yellow Pine reacted first, and Spruce followed. I mean, it was like right almost simultaneously. I want to say within 5-day window. And what happened was those 4-inch long links were the first ones to take off, obviously, because you can tell by where they're printing at. But I mean, if you look at 6-inch and print's a great guide, but I don't use it to buy lumber just because there's always.
You can't.
I mean, you can't. Right. I mean, if you read it, it already happened. But it got cheap. And when you look at some of the numbers that we were able to pay out of the Central and where they're at today, I mean, there's probably very similar items. I mean, there's probably $40, $50, same spread almost, $40, $50 increase in price from the bottom to where we are today. So it's interesting how they've not equally reacted, right, as far as price appreciation and where you're getting delivered markets wise.
Yeah.
But just the percentage of dollars is very, very like in kind. But then again, if you really dive into the numbers and specify it, it's 12 and longer than 4-inch and some 6-inch and some 12s, but that's about it.
What is 4-inch?
Have you guys noticed a question for you, Ashley and Charles, in the last, I don't know, year or two? Have you noticed that markets are less receptive to having some 8s and 10s on their random trucks and cars, and that everybody wants 12 and longer all of a sudden, and that people have forgotten what to do with 8s and 10s?
I get a call once a day for 4 and 6. 4-inch 8s, big treater item, right? Big retail item for us in Southern Yellow Pine. But I mean, 6-inch, it's a dog. 6-inch, 8-foot, 1 through 3. I
wonder what happened in the industry in the last couple 3 years that is, and it's not just one market I'm thinking of in my mind. There's 2 big markets that I sell into. We're talking states that consume a lot of lumber in this country, and both of them are telling me the same thing. We can't use any more 8s and 10s. It's like they just don't know what to do with them anymore. They cut them into studs, or they just like don't buy them.
Yeah, I mean, 8s and 10s have been good in 6-inch because just 6-inch is moving right now. But I think a lot more people like 12 and longers for sure, right? Maybe it's less jostling around on a job site, right? Or it just saves time.
I think people are looking at utilization rates, right? And yield. If you look at it in the field, right? I mean, it's easier to lay down a 12-foot and cover more space than line up a bunch of 8s.
Yeah.
If you're using
you ever been to a job site?
Never, Matt. Never been to one before.
How many 16-footers did they cut 3 feet off of, and then
I agree with you.
Throw the 3-foot scrap into a pile that they're going to get a dump truck and pick it up and take it to the dump.
I have that conversation all the time.
So growing up in a lumberyard, when I used to have to pull job packs, my dad would be like, "All right, now pull this much lineal for the plate," right? So when I was a kid, I'd pull all 14s and 16s, right? And he'd be like, what are you doing? He goes, make sure you get some 8s, 10s, and 12s on there, because don't just give these guys 6. Every carpenter would want all 16s if they could get them.
Yeah,
right?
I don't understand that mentality, because, if you think about it, 12-foot's probably the best utilization rate through it all.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I think of when somebody goes 12 and longer? You know what I think of? 12s.
Yeah.
That's 12 and longer.
And it's the most cost-effective thing.
It's 12s. Why'd you send me a whole bunch of 12s? Hey, you asked for 12 and longer.
You said it like 46 12s and 116.
You didn't specify you wanted 14s and 16s, right?
I got to tell you guys a funny, true story about one of my first customers in the business. This guy was, he passed away a few years ago, but he was a smart man, and he started his career as a wholesale distributor, right? So eventually the company turned into a giant retailer, but his gimmick was he was out there selling 12 and longer lineal to all his customers. And this is back in the early 90s. And then he would just ship them a truck of 12s or 5 trucks of 12s.
Yeah.
And he did this for years. This went on for like 20 years. I'd call him up and I'd say, hey, I'm going to go buy 20 cars of this, and 10 cars will be straight 12s and the other 10 will be random. And he'd just go, oh yeah, that'll work. No problem. Because he was taking those 10 cars of 12s and just going to jam them into his customers as 12 and longer lineal. He didn't ever ship them the 14s and 16s. He just shipped them 12s. Those days are over, right? Like the crafty owner operator and guys that sort of had these little regional gimmicks. They've all either sold out to BFS or USLBM or 84, or their businesses are still there, but they've passed away, right? So our business is just different now than it used to be. It's a lot more corporate now.
And you could run a shorter. You could get a 14-foot straight truck and run it all over. Hell, you could get put a flatbed on the back of your F-250 and haul job sites out.
Ashley, when you and I were young traders in the mid 90s, there was a time where 14s were the cheapest length out there. 12s were actually a premium to 14s.
That's a good point.
You remember
You
that?
know why that changed in Southern Yellow Pine? Because of linear saws and component plants.
What happened?
Wow. Okay.
What happened?
They just set up to max yield out of 14s, and I've had guys at some mills will double and trim a 14 or a 16. They don't have, a quarter of an inch or an eighth of an inch overage, and I'll get phone calls and say, "Oh, I don't want anything ever from that mill again, just because their yielding's off," and they get one less piece. It's interesting. It really is. And my tech and everybody else that makes them, TCT and what have you, they want 14s and 16s. That's another reason why you saw a big appreciation in 14s and 16s.
Well, good. Well, before we jump into marry, date, or dump, Charles, you look like you've been working out. You're looking yoked there with the aqua shirt on, man.
Hey, I'm trying to stay young, man. There's enough stress in my life. I got to get rid of it somehow.
You still doing the cold plunges?
Every morning.
Cold plunges in the what was that drink you told me about last night? The wine mom?
Oh, soccer moms.
Soccer mom.
I can't believe we're talking about this,
Matt, you know what a soccer mom drink is?
I don't know. What is that?
So it's a three quarters of a glass of White Claw, topped off with a quarter glass of vodka. Did I get that mix right, Charles?
No, you're exactly. It's more like a third.
So it's in my notebook from yesterday. I wrote it down along a PO from somebody, and I got it circled. And I'm like, some of the stuff you come up with is amazing. I love that. Well,
I gotta stay creative, man. It was my wife turned 43 today, and
that's awesome.
She wanted to let her hair down, so
Jump into the minivan, kids. We're gonna have a great old time at the swim park.
Why do you think all the women have all stainless steel cups now with straws? They're not clear anymore. Have you noticed that?
I
have not.
No,
I gotta give a shout out to a buddy of mine. I didn't come up with that name, but he did, and he gets all the credit in the world because when he told me that in a text message, I about fell out of my chair.
He may have just developed a new drink. We're gonna go into the store a year from now, and they're gonna have a can of soccer. It's gonna call Soccer Mom on it. That's crazy. All right, so let's go into the marry, date, and dump segment, which is perfect after that. Matt, you teed up for it. You want to lead us off?
Yeah, right. I want to marry because of the market dynamics that we've been talking about and the increase in activity from the multifamily side of things here in the second half of the year. I want to marry cheap 2x4 8s and 9s in whitewood or Doug fir if you can get them, or yellow pine. I mean, I don't do that, but I just think they're undervalued compared. I mean, I'm seeing I was offered some 9-footers today for less than what I'm selling 2x4 number 3 for, in random.
Wow. Okay.
So that kind of stuff intrigues me. I want to own it, and I don't want to hedge it. I don't want to basis trade it. I just want to own it outright, marry it. And then 16s, I talked about that last week. I still want to marry 2x4 16s if I can find cheap 16s in Euro or 2 and better spruce or 2 and better hemp fir, Doug fir. I don't really care. I just think they're undervalued and they're on a run, and they're going to continue to run all the way into the end of September, maybe even into the end of October, before we get into the next year where, what'll happen is the Euros will start bringing in a bunch more 2x4 16s in the first and second quarter again, and this will just all replay itself. But this happened last year, and I think it'll happen again. I think we'll see a fairly significant increase in value of 2x4 16s, any species dry. And that's what I want to marry. And the stuff I want to date is I'm just dating my inventory. I'm not investing a lot of chips into my inventory. I'm keeping it about half of what I was keeping it in the first half of the year. And I intend to keep it about half and just spin it faster, So I'm dating my inventory, if that makes sense. I'm also narrowing the items that I'm carrying in my inventory to just a couple SKUs. I'm not going to have 7 different things or 12 different things. I'm just going to have a couple, 3 different things, and just boring trading, whatever you want to call it. But that's going to be me for the next 5 months. And then things that I want to dump. I wouldn't say I want to dump anything because the market's not really like that right now. But I still want to sell 2x4 12-foot number 3. I've actually sold a fair chunk of those here in the last week since we talked about last Wednesday. I want to sell some more. I'm not done yet. And then after that, I probably will just want to go back to the normal things of short 2x4 8s and 10s. Like, we always have that problem. That never goes away. So
Yeah.
there's my thoughts.
Charles?
Boring trading is what I'm going to marry for the rest of the year.
Okay.
The risk profile that it takes to transact business and the fact that the market doesn't want to pay you for it is kind of a misnomer for me. And right now, I mean, a $5 move is a big deal. I think, and Ash, I think I mentioned this to you yesterday when we were talking after hours. I mean, a $5 to $10 move, and the way this market is, specifically in my species, and obviously y'all are seeing some appreciation and it's happening a little bit faster and it's sustaining itself for various reasons. I think there's more risk in the market now than there was in COVID because things are so swift to move one way or the other.
Yeah.
And in order to make any money, you got to take on big risk. So boring trading. I don't think, I mean, the only thing I'll always stay married to is our production and what we have to do for that. But I mean, outside of that, we're just going to bide our time and steady as she rose.
Yeah, you guys made me think of one thing. I have a note in here, Greg, and we're talking about the other day. Inventory is an asset, right? For a long time, a lot of the people tell you, you got to get rid of your inventory. You got to get rid of your inventory is a real asset if it's managed correctly, right? And I think that that's important. I heard both of you guys say that as long as it's the right managed inventory, and that's how you can make a living. So what I want to marry, Matt, you got me just jacked up on it last week. 16 footers. I like them, and they are starting to make a move. And now I'm fighting between how many you got to sell every day, right? Like in even though I think they're going to go up higher, I still got to sell every day, but I have enough of them. So all good. Date. I want to keep dating MSR. I like MSR. I want to date 2x6, 104 and 5/8. I've gotten more inquiries on 2x6, 104 and 5/8 studs, 9-foot studs in the last week than probably anything else all over. And it must be in a lot of it's job site stuff, right? And if I wanted, and another thing I want to date, anything that I still have in premium, and we're seeing this in Euro because there's a lot less whitewood premium out there and a lot less Euro out there. The premium market is starting to really move well, especially on 6-inch. I wish I owned more 6-inch. I don't really want to dump this, but I do want to lighten up on it. I want to light up on my entire 14-foot position. We got a lot of 14s and random and MSR and all kinds of other things over the last 3 months. And I just don't think 14s are going to hold that premium to 16s. It'll probably be from 16s moving. So I want to get the value for 14s while I still can and just get it right sized back to normal. So that's
to that point, though, do you think 16s will catch 14s and you'll find an equilibrium between the two?
I think you already are, and I've seen that price already adjust where 16s are on top of 14s for the most part, but there's still some people still want to buy some 14s. And like I said, Matt always says that you want to feed the ducks when they're quacking. When somebody wants 14s right now and it's close to my number, I'm taking the order.
Yeah. I learned that from Ryan Miller. I have to give props to that guy because he's the one that taught me that one. I stole it from him.
I won't tell you what I learned from Ryan Miller. No.
In fact, I remember hanging out with you and Ryan Miller one time.
Ryan's a great dude.
We're not going to talk about it, though.
Ryan's a great dude. Hope he's listening. All right. Well, guys, been 50 minutes. I appreciate it. We'll keep circling up after hours. My wife loves hearing me talk to both of you about lumber on the back porch.
I'm sure.
That's awesome.
So I appreciate you both being here, Charles. Thanks for staying after hours down there, and you guys have a great day.
Thanks for having me, fellas.
Have a good one. Take it easy,
boys.
man.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of The Lumber Word. The Lumber Word podcast is dedicated to engaging conversations about the lumber industry, including trading ideas, market trends, and evaluations of overvalued and undervalued assets. We wish to emphasize that the discussions and opinions expressed in this podcast are purely for informational and entertainment purposes. They should not be considered as financial or investment advice. We encourage our listeners to make their own financial decisions, taking into account their unique circumstances and financial goals, and to seek professional financial advice if necessary.